I think it is their creation, but I think that there are a couple of things that are in play, right? And when you hear that kind of argument, it's like, okay, one thing is to say, oh, people should get paid, right? Work is work. Cultural work is still work, right? And cultural work is part of a business, and it's just like, you know, like Coleman, like he showed up to work that day. He did a job of work, and he went home, and the same with Spencer and all everybody else in the band. But they did actually get paid for that day.
Oh, okay.
Right? They got paid for that day. But they didn't get paid for the perpetual extension of their work through time, right? They didn't get, like, I don't know, 50 cents every time someone sampled it or something, right? But they, if they had that control, someone would have gone for something else that was easier to sample and had an easier workaround, right? So also there are these competing ideas about, like, there's another idea which goes, well, culture can't be reduced to a business, right? Like, we can't, you know, you can't trademark a word, right? Like, there's that guy who trademarked freedom of speech, right? He said, oh, I own that phrase. You're not allowed to use that. Like, you can't trademark ideas. You can't really copyright sounds, right? And sounds are sort of cultural. There's that kind of argument is in play. That people can say, oh, culture isn't a business, and it shouldn't just be a business. And if it was just a business, you're looking at a kind of a totalitarian regime, right? No one wants to see that in play. No one wants to see human creativity reduced to something which just has an exchange value, an economic value, right? And it doesn't, by its very nature, it exceeds that. And that's something that we should probably endorse and accept, and we should embrace people's creativity however it works. And another thing that's going on, which is being disavowed or whatever in those kinds of arguments, is this ethnic or racial aspect, right? Is the idea that the Amen emerges from and is part of a continuum of an African-American vernacular cultural tradition associated with gospel and these other things, which was going on for a very long time, and which was always collaborative, you know, and which wasn't about a proprietary model, and it wasn't about, unlike the Western art tradition, it wasn't saying, I wrote this, I own this, you know, Beethoven, he's the man, he wrote the thing, we should worship him, even though, of course, Beethoven is drawing on all kinds of sources, right? So that model was not in play in the African-American cultural tradition. It was always a collaborative, communal model, right? So this is why it kind of made sense in early hip-hop to go, oh yeah, well, look, what has James Brown got, you know, what have these different people got to offer us? The tradition, in fact, like most other musical traditions, has always been borrowing from the past. It's always been doing that, and it was kind of more evident in the African-American tradition somehow, right? Than it is in this proprietary Western art model. I mean, this is one of the arguments which is in play, and it's like we kind of have to be cautious about it, but people go, okay, yeah, it's part of, like Amen Brother itself is made out of a couple of other tunes, right? And those tunes would have been made out of bits of other tunes, right? And that's how folk traditions persist. They, you know, everything is always made out of bits of other old things. They're put together in new ways. And so, yeah, so people would say, so this is like one of the ways in which, in quite a subtle way, you can see this kind of anxiety about ethnicity in play, because it's like now it's mostly white guys sampling it, right? And so somehow NWA, that was more legitimate or authentic. There's something going on about authenticity and the relationship between authenticity and race, right? So there's something going on there where it's like, somehow it's more okay for NWA than it is for middle-class white kids messing around on their computer now. You know, that seems to be the case. But I mean, overall, I think it's been a good thing. It's been an extraordinary thing, and it's been a way to see something remarkable happening in the history of recorded music and the history of sampling, the history of approaches to music and to music production. And we kind of need it, you know, we kind of need the Amen. It kind of needs to be there to tell that story, you know, and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it sounds very disingenuous or something. You know, if you're like Coleman's children, you know, and wherever they work, you know, they're not millionaires. They didn't get what Elvis's children got out of Elvis's work, right? Like, why is that, you know? And it's partly to do with that thing about copyright and the idea that it doesn't refer to sound, it refers to the written, to the notes.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so I mean, this is why, like, this is one of the reasons why there was difficulty enforcing copyright against hip-hop sampling, was that it didn't actually refer to the sound. And there was a thing about fair use also, right? There was a thing about how, like, is the sound identifiable? To what extent is it identifiable? There was this kind of grey, amorphous area people were trying to figure out and delineate exactly what it was. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it seems like it does. I mean, the cultural, the stuff that comes out of the Amen basically is, yes, I mean, it is, in some ways it can be considered an industry, right? It's like, yeah, there are people who are turning a buck out of this, there are people who are selling records, people go to see gigs, yeah, there's money involved still in listening to the Amen, but it's hard to say that it's directly related to it in that kind of way, and also it's always been with a relative degree of autonomy from the market, right? To some extent, it's always been a little bit outside of that. It's always been I mean, this is one of the reasons why it was, in fact, the Amen, is because of its sort of like, it's being kind of outside of the mainstream.
Yeah.
You know, that's been the way in which customarily it's been used, is in a weird way to actually construct a position outside of the mainstream, right? And of course, like, African American culture has been positioned in that way historically, you know.
Yeah.